Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Thanks for joining us. I'm Peter B. Collins in San Francisco, and this is a delayed live broadcast in support of Newsbud. And Newsbud is on the drawing boards right now. We are picking up funding from people who are hungry for new media outlets and independent media reporting. And with your help, we're going to raise the money to be able to launch Newsbud later this year. I'm Peter B. Collins. I'm in San Francisco. Sibel Edmonds will be joining us from Oregon a little bit later. In fact, she has just logged in. And Sibel, we are live on YouTube and on the Google Hangout now. I think we have corrected the technical problems that I personally created. And I'm learning a lot about how these things work. I'm an old school radio guy. I know about video, but the online network stuff is a new tool to use, and I think we're getting a grip on it right now. So without any further ado, I want to introduce Mickey Huff. He is one of the directors of Project Censored, and every year Project Censored publishes a list of at least 25 major news stories that were ignored or given limited coverage by the mainstream media. Project Censored is celebrating its 40th anniversary this year. And let's go to Mickey because he's got the latest edition of the book. Go ahead and hold that up. And I remember when Carl Jensen first started Project Censored at Sonoma State University, and it's hard to believe that that was 40 years ago, Mickey. But you and Peter Phillips and other people have picked up the baton and explained to our viewers what the mission of Project Censored is.
Well, Peter, thanks so much for having me back, and Sibel, it's wonderful to be here with the both of you. We are assuredly at Project Censored and the Media Freedom Foundation, our nonprofit. We are very much supportive of the Peter B. Collins Show, Boiling Frogs, all the great work that you do as independent journalists. And you know what Project Censored does is we cover the news that doesn't make the news, and we try to help analyze and explain to people why that is. Since 1976, as you said, Peter, we've been doing this, and it's a student research project. We're very much centered around media literacy, public media, education. And we're really behind critical thinking and a critical pedagogy for understanding media. And we also train people how to be the media. And this is something that Carl Jensen started in 1976 after a question that he asked himself. He said, how is it that Richard Nixon waltzed into the White House in 1972, given that the so-called alternative media had already reported on his Watergate shenanigans? But the corporate press, what people erroneously call the mainstream press, there's nothing mainstream about 6 corporations that own the media, 90% of it in the United States. But he said, how is it that that took so long for the alleged heroes at the Washington Post to unearth the story that other people were talking about? And Carl, you know, was a journalism man, and so he really just started to question himself. He said, well, how is it that I missed that story? And that was the genesis of Project Censored, was what else are we missing? You know, he considered himself a very well-informed communications person, journalism person, and he said, I don't know, how did we miss this? And the way that we miss these things is because the important stories are drowned out in a din, right, of sensationalism and what Carl called junk food news, propaganda, and so forth, public relations. And Carl was committed. He committed the latter part of his career, the second half of his career, to educating students about media literacy, to research stories in alternative independent media, and then find out why wasn't this being covered? Why was the corporate media not covering this? Of course, you know, later on, you know, we learn a lot more about that through the propaganda model, Noam Chomsky, Edward Herman, advertisers, ownership, flack, official sourcing, ideological bias. There's a whole host of reasons why these stories don't get picked up by the for-profit media. And Carl shined a light on that and said, we need to have a strong, vibrant, independent press in this country. And we do, and we have the First Amendment protecting journalists. Of course, that's come under attack at various times in our history. Certainly, more so under President Obama, arguably, where we've had more prosecution of whistleblowers than at any time in our history, an assault on truth tellers. And that's why we need independent media. That's why I said before we need Newsbud, we need Boiling Frogs. These are the kind of groups Project Censored highlights every year. And Carl Jensen really got the ball rolling. Peter Phillips picked it up and ran with it. And now we've grown to over 20 campuses around the U.S. We've worked in over 6 countries. We've got an award-winning documentary film. We actually have 2 of them now. We've got a radio station on 32 stations from Pacifica around the U.S. And we're still carrying on that mission. And we started a new group, a new collaboration between ACME, the Action Coalition for Media Education, and Sacred Heart University Graduate School program in media literacy and digital culture, where we're really pushing media literacy as an issue. We're pushing it as part of citizenship and civic duty in the 21st century. And that's what Project Censored is about. It's about celebrating the free press, celebrating those reporters that tell the truth and jeopardize their own careers in the process. Sibel Edmonds, I don't need to tell you about that. You really put your neck out after 9/11, to tell the truth about what was wrong with our sort of our alleged safeguards and our systems to protect free expression. And that's really what we do at Project Censored. And again, we've been doing it for 40 years, and we intend to keep doing it. Your viewers and listeners can check us out more at projectcensored.org.
And Nikki, I want to note that I was a witness to a time when Project Censored was censored. This was at a media reform conference a few years back.
In Minneapolis.
Yeah, you and Peter Phillips were tabling. It can be used as a verb. And you had declared a truth emergency.
Indeed.
And I think the truth emergency continues to exist. And the organizers of the Media Reform Conference essentially censored you. They said, please, this isn't the right place for this. And there's a Fox News crew over here. We can't let them see this. And this is an example of how even those with good intentions to reform the corporate media in this country don't have the independence and the courage to stand up and call a lie, and call a truth emergency for what it is.
I'm afraid that's right, Peter B. And we certainly, we never intended to disparage any of the Free Press organization members. Certainly they've done a lot of great work over the years, but there was some great irony involved in that event where they had an online vote for people to select what panels they wanted to see at the event. And ours was actually selected second in its category, and yet they decided that we didn't merit our own session based on censorship of topics. So we decided to have our own breakout session, and we had over 45 people there, more than attended some of their own sessions. And we used that platform to call attention to the rank hypocrisy among people crying media freedom, crying for a free press. And at Project Censored, we have pretty simple guidelines. There's nothing that should be sidelined. There's nothing that should not be reported. And if we have controversy or dispute about facts, we should debate it openly. We should invite people to present their cases. We shouldn't attack them. We shouldn't ad hominem attack. We shouldn't use a straw person to distort people's arguments and viewpoints. We should allow them to be heard, and we should allow them to be debated on the factual merits as they're transparently sourced in an alleged open marketplace of ideas. Strangely, there wasn't one at the Free Press Conference. And we did it again in Denver, where we were tabled and sidelined, and they gave us our 15 minutes on the soapbox, so to speak, of our free speech. And when later the conference organizer said, "Yeah, you guys are right. We can't seem to be able to control these things and make everybody happy." And and whatever it was, and we weren't interested in having some kind of fight with these people. We just found it incredibly ironic that at the Free Press Conference they were censoring people like Project Censored, and others, by the way, many others. It wasn't just us. It was anybody that had something that the left media was too afraid to talk about, whether it was election fraud, 9/11. And look, you don't even have to go into things like Building 7. The commission report itself is wrought with so many flaws and so much corruption that to not talk about it is a blatant act of censorship. Yeah. So we were pretty mystified by the whole process, to be quite frank.
And Mickey, let me turn to Sibel Edmonds, because she has long talked about what she calls the pseudo-alternative media. And there's some great reporters who work for some of these independent outlets, but as a group, as a body of work, they often come up short and pull punches and protect the establishment in ways that are really hard to understand. So, Sibel, take a moment here to talk about your views about the weakness of some of the independent media and how Newsbud hopes to change that.
Well, I don't know. How are we characterizing or defining independent media? Because other than some individuals, let's say with James Corbett, who just joined us here, and a handful of people like James Corbett, I don't think I have come across any independent media. Because I think we are going with a stricter definition of independent media. And I know there are a lot of people out there who have set up what they coin independent media, but based on the standards that I'm plugging in here, we are abiding by, this model doesn't exist. And I can give you an example, okay? One example is they set up a lot of these, the ones with some resources as 501c3 nonprofit organization, okay? I dealt with that for years during my National Security Whistleblowers Coalition activism. I looked into it, and what I found out was there is no such a thing as free lunch. So government says, okay, I'll exempt you from giving taxes, and I'll exempt the people who donate you by giving them tax credit. But when you look at those forms that IRS puts in there and the rules that they say you have to abide by. Now, if you are running a soup house for the homeless, no problem, okay? But if you are running a media organization and you take that and say, okay, we can raise more money and have more money by being 501c3, you are giving up at least 30–40% of your independence. You have to check with attorneys and accountants who will tell you, actually, you can't go this far saying this, or you can't engage in this, or you can't engage in that. Well, to me, getting into that category of 501c3 takes away from your independence at least by 30%. That's why we are not setting nonprofit. You know what? Because there is no free lunch, and I'm not going to abide by this corrupt government's, okay, orders and rules, and limit ourselves and limit our journalists and engage in censorship of my own, speeches, my own interviews or the people I interview, because it is extremely easy to violate. Because believe me, if you're doing real journalism, and I haven't been seeing much of that, if you're doing real journalism, okay, they're going to be watching, and the things that they wouldn't stick to other organizations, they would come and stick it to you. So 501c3, impossible. I would never do it. Yes, we're going to pay the taxes, and we're going to suffer for it, okay? Yes, the people who are going to donate to us, they are not going to get some tax, whatever, credit or exemption. But this is doing it the real way and the hard way. And I'm sorry with anyone who's going to disagree with this, you can't be abiding by the government rules with 501c3 and maintain complete independence. So that's one. And then the second thing I see different is the makeup of our journalists, partners that we are going to feature, and contract producers. I haven't seen this model. I have not seen an alternative, and any organization, media organization that is defining itself as alternative, where you have side by side 3, 4 different political philosophies on a daily basis, meaning libertarian, anarchists, agorists, leftists, rightists. So anybody who can come, who comes and visits your site, if you ask, say, what is this site? What is this site's political leaning? They won't be able to tell you because it's all there. And it's not leaning this way or leaning that way. We are not in the leaning business, okay? We're going to be talking about the issues, and sometimes we are going to broadcast 2, 3, sometimes contradicting point of views. I mean, currently, Peter, we are covering this case of, Lavoy Finicum shooting, and you interviewed because that's the kind of integrity you have. You may be left-leaning, but you provided a very objective, good forum for someone to come talk about the major cover-up the government, and especially here, state government in Oregon is engaged in, okay? And I can tell you right off the bat that I had one person that has been working with us saying, we should not cover this. And I'm offended because that kind of gets into some militia protest, and therefore we should not cover it. And I said, I'm sorry, if you're uncomfortable with this, either go get comfortable or you can just gracefully exit. And that is going to be the attitude, and I don't see that. I'm sorry, I have been searching other than individual bloggers, individual producers. That's why they can't remain, I guess, independent. I haven't seen organization, more than 3, 4 people coming together and make this a reality, make this model survive, exist, and thrive. And that's one of the second biggest differences that we are going to have, hopefully.
And let me turn to Professor Huff, because we have seen a proliferation of independent media that has a clear ideological tilt or lean. And what we're talking about at Newsbud is pure journalism, where I put aside my own bias in order to get a source to offer me their perspective on a controversial event like the Oregon standoff. And I'm neither, a Second Amendment hugger or an extreme tree hugger, and I can see, valid perspectives from a range on the ideological spectrum. But many of the independent outlets that we see today really are either promoting a left or a right perspective, or a pretty clearly identified Republican or Democratic perspective.
Well, at Project Censored, we do have a bias. We're in favor of the First Amendment. We're opposed to censorship in any form, including self-censorship. We believe there should be a vibrant free press where all views have a free path to be heard and unobstructed or unspun. And we think that people should be able to tell their stories and present the evidence and let people decide for themselves what it means. And at Project Censored for 40 years, we put forward stories. Some of them are troubling to different groups in the country, but we put them forward not necessarily because we always agree with them, but because we think that they're extremely important and people have not only a right to hear them, but we as a society should be debating these kinds of issues. We should be debating the hard questions, and it shouldn't be. And I know what you're saying, Peter. The quote-unquote independent media, it tends to skew one way or another. And what I think is kind of funny at Project Censored is that, some people accuse us of being far left. Some people on the left accuse us of being far right, depending on the issue. I mean, again, I just kind of sit around in the middle and laugh about it. It's just sort of like, well, I guess if we're angering people on this side, that side, and the other, we must be doing something right. We're trying to generate discussion and debate. And while I may personally have a viewpoint, or Peter, or Peter Phillips, or Andy Roth, our associate director, or we work with Abby Martin from Empire Files and other people, and again, it's not that we don't have ideas or opinions, so to speak, but we're really interested in going after the roots of the story. And that's what radical journalism does. It looks to the roots of the story. It looks to see, how is this happening? Why is this happening? Who's benefiting from this? And we've gotten into a lot of trouble at the project over the years because we dared to criticize the sacred cows of left progressive media. And that doesn't go over in left circles, I can tell you. We have a radio show at KPFA every week, and sometimes I think that place is like a circular firing squad. It's like, even though we're all trying to go in and allegedly do the same things, if you don't pass someone's litmus test, you get kicked to the curb, man.
Yeah.
And we've been kicked to the curb so often, it's kind of like our home. It's like a second home.
Yeah, your show is broadcast live from the curb, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. As often it is. And when we were calling out the reporting, Pacifica reporting on Libya or Syria or whatever, and we've really taken some, I would say, hard and unfair hits from many left and progressive journalists. Of course, corporate journalists, if they even know about us, they don't even understand the language we speak, pretty much. But there really is a bias in independent media, and the easiest way to find it is to just follow the funding. And that's what Sibel's getting at. And we, by the way, we are a 501c3, but we don't exactly get a lot of money because the foundations that would support us once upon a time, they stopped supporting us when we questioned 9/11. They stopped supporting us when we covered election fraud unapologetically. They stopped supporting us when we talked about issues, whether it was ranging from immigration to especially even civil rights and civil liberties. There are certain groups and organizations that just draw lines when you're supporting a certain group that you're not supposed to support anymore, right? Like you were saying earlier, Peter. I personally am not a gun toter. I'm not in favor of gun ownership, so I don't own one. But I don't think I have a place or a role in the society to tell other people, what their right is on that front. And I think that we really go too far when we start disrespecting the rights of others, allegedly in maintenance of our own interests. And that's why, as a Project Censored, as a First Amendment organization, we want vibrant debate. We want reasonable discourse about gun ownership and gun regulation. Look, we do not live in a perfect world or society. We live in one, whether we like it or not, that's addled with regulations. So let's have intelligent conversation about what we want that to look like, right? We can talk about utopias till we're blue in the face. We can talk about banning guns. We can talk about everybody owning 500 guns. But that's not the world we live in. And media journalism is supposed to tell the people what's really going on. It's supposed to provide a platform for people to openly discuss and debate those ideas without filtration or infiltration, COINTELPRO style. And we're supposed to be able to have that discussion. And if you don't have a vibrant media, and if you don't have journalists that are willing to get out of their own way and let other people tell the stories, we're contributing to the problem, right? We're contributing to the cacophony that our corporate media has generated. So, and again, I realize some of the things I said are things that you all might disagree with, or certainly other people might disagree with. But that's what the free press is for. It's to hear ideas that we don't necessarily want to hear.
Right.
And
that's Professor Nikki Huff from Project Censored. And in a moment, I want to get a comment from James Corbett, who is one of our founding contributors for Newsbud. And before that, though, I want to remind you that we're here to invite you to support the funding for our independent media platform called Newsbud. And we are raising money at Kickstarter.com right now. And you can follow the links from newsbud.com to the Kickstarter page. At both newsbud.com and Kickstarter, you can view our informational video. It's less than 5 minutes long. On the Kickstarter page is a detail of the budget and some of the contributors who have already signed on for Newsbud. And so we're inviting you to help us out, to come and help us become the independent media outlet that we're describing here, and help us overcome the conflicts and the limitations, the compromise that comes from either being advertiser supported or being foundation or government supported. And that's why we're making the case to you, the public, that you can own an interest in reforming the media by supporting our Kickstarter campaign. So right now, we have 1,239 contributors, and they have pledged a total of $123,000. I'd like to see in the next 24 hours that we hit the 1,300 number of contributors, and I'd love to see us close in on the $200,000 mark. We need to continue to push. We need to ask you to keep sharing this information with your networks of friends and like-minded individuals, because it's a heavy lift to get to the $950,000 that we've set as our goal, and we can't do it without you. So with that, I want to turn to James Corbett, who joins us from Western Japan, where he is based. And James, you've heard the conversation with Professor Huff, and I wanted to get you to weigh in because you and I have some differing political views. But I feel very comfortable being in the same milieu with you because I respect the integrity of your work. And it is media integrity that's the bottom line for us at Newsbud. And that's why I believe we're going to be able to present real, strong, honest journalism, regardless of the bias of our viewers, listeners, and supporters, because our mission is really to expose the truth as we can find it.
First of all, let me check. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, we can.
Okay, great. Well, yes, what a fascinating conversation, because this to me gets to what is one of the most important parts of this internet alternative media phenomenon that is taking place worldwide right now, which is namely that we, the viewer-supported, listener-supported paradigm represents the only chance to escape that echo chamber environment that you're referring to with the leaning. Every outlet has a particular leaning. And you can't escape that with the corporate advertising model, obviously, because the corporate advertising model will feature support for whatever the corporatocracy wants represented in the media. And of course, the foundation funding comes with its own strings. The government funding comes with its own strings. The people-funded media is the only chance to escape that type of echo chamber environment. But it also comes with its own problems because, of course, people like to feel that they're contributing to something that they themselves believe in. People like to hear what they already believe reflected back at them. So if someone with a left-leaning bias or a right-leaning bias or what have you will tend to support outlets that say the types of comforting things that they've heard before a million times and would like to hear a million more times. So there is that possibility of just it going back into an echo chamber environment. But there is also the possibility that if a motivated and informed media consumer, to use that phrase, there's got to be a better word for that, it recognizes the value in hearing other perspectives, then this is the only funding model through which we can achieve that. We will never expect to hear anti-foundation rhetoric from the foundations, anti-corporation rhetoric from the corporations, anti-government rhetoric from the government. It will never happen. The only way we can take aim at every and any valid target is if it's people funded. But again, people, I think, have been so ensconced in this echo chamber environment for so long, and it is intensifying to a large degree online, which is why I think Newsbud is so potentially truly revolutionary, if it does manage to come together in the way that we're talking about, with all sides represented, and people funding it themselves, recognizing that it is in their interests to hear things that they may be uncomfortable with. That is the truly revolutionary potential of this moment.
Well, let me offer a comment and ask for reaction from both Mickey Huff and Sibel Edmonds. I see this Newsbud campaign that we're running right now as kind of a test of the American media consumer, because with sophisticated market research and the advertiser imperative to get as many eyeballs in front of a screen, whether it's a TV network or an online outlet, that really causes this kind of pandering. And I think American media consumers now have become accustomed to that. And I wonder if there are enough people who really have an appetite for honest journalism, or has the public been so misled and misdirected and comforted by, reporting that appeals to that individual's existing bias, that there may not be a market for honest journalism in the United States anymore. Let me ask Sibel to comment on that first.
This is, I think, one of the most important issue and I'm so glad that James brought it up, because we have been dealing with this. We dealt with this as a whistleblowers organization, and we were not 501c3 or C4 or any of those stuff. We didn't have board of advisors, and we have been dealing with this with Boiling Frogs Post. Let me give you a quick example. It's very interesting. We cover or expose a story, an investigative case that is, that is supported by the left, right? As soon as we put it on Boiling Frogs Post and we put it on the Twitter, I get, let's say, 50 to 200 new followers on the Twitter and maybe 10 new subscribers at Boiling Frogs Post, okay? Simultaneously, I get 10, 15 people who are more right-leaning unsubscribing from Boiling Frogs Post, okay? And they go and they unfollow me and Boiling Frogs Post at the Twitter. And you know what has happened? I think we have come to this level thing. I don't say we are expanding or gaining at all. It is amazing to see this, what I refer to, the yo-yo mechanism, that you do this, they come, hooray, Sibel is great, these journalists with Boiling Frogs Post are great, here, I'm going to donate to you, I'm going to do this, and then you get equal number, or sometimes more, who say, damn you for doing this. This is disgusting. You shill. You must be, I don't know. Oh, now you showed your true bleeding heart liberalism. Now you have been uncovered. And 2 months later, you just flip it, okay? We are covering an issue, and then we got all the lefts, I would say at least 75 to 80, just in the past 3-4 weeks, who have unsubscribed, who have sent incredibly nasty hate emails, calling me a sexist because I have been covering this issue, and calling me anti-Muslim, and I come from a Muslim country, and calling me a right-wing skinhead racist. How many liberals? I mean, I'm talking about Berkeley liberals, okay? I'm talking about people who are warning me that I have gone down the deep end. I'm now associating, I have to quote verbatim, with the skinhead Nazi Hicks, and look what has become of me, okay? So, but I have gained at least that number from people who just subscribed, who previously thought I was liberal. So to get back to James' point, it is a test. He's absolutely right, and I want to find out about this too, because I've been in this for a long time. Peter. We've been in this for a long, long time, from the whistleblowing journey, the organization Boiling Frogs Post, and I gave up. I already said they are irrelevant because they have made we the people irrelevant. This is the United States Congress. We are talking about the federal courts and all these supposedly watchdog organizations that are the extension of the billionaire sugar daddies and the government itself. So this is the last stop for me. Let me put it this way. Newsbud and this team, this magnificent team, this opportunity is the last trial, because if I'm proven that no, it's not about any of this stuff, it's maybe too late, because people want either what James just described, this or that. I want to come and I want to feel good about what I believe. I want to come to this echo room. I want to be with the like-minded people. I want to be narrow-minded. I'm an ideal. Most people have turned into this ideologue positions, okay? And if this proves the case with Newsbud, I am going to do what James has been doing, but maybe even in a smaller scale, and I don't want to have anything to do with those people. I'm happy to have a handful of people who may be interested, or maybe 2-3 dozens of people. But I am not going to change what we have been, what I have been, in order to pander, in order to bring the funds. Peter, do you know what I have heard the most? Every time I do something journalistically correct with integrity, I hear somebody either from the right or the left coming and saying, uh-oh, you're going to now burn and destroy your bridges because it's going to piss off that group. And then, you know, I do something else and they come and say, Sibel, do you see that? This is why none of these NGOs, nonprofits are supporting you, because you keep going right and left and doing this stuff. You have to pick sides. And hasn't it been proven to you so far? And I'm telling our audience, I'm telling our supporter, this is the chance. Let's see. I'm hoping that we will do it. If not, that's going to be the point, I guess, when I have to announce and say I have given up, especially here in this country, that it's not. Because when the opportunity arises, here is the opportunity. They are not taking it because maybe I'm engaged in wishful thinking. Possibly I'm seeing it from the Pollyannesque kind of a viewpoint. But what James said here, I mean, I think it's the most important determinant, is the most important determining factor, and I'm so glad he brought it up.
And Mickey Huff, what's your comment on the pandering and the way too many consumers seem to prefer to only get news that has been filtered to please them?
It's increasingly a problem, the whole algorithms online with social media and CIA book, as I like to call it. You know, it's really a grand experiment in thought control and manipulation. It's going on writ large. It's one of the greatest Big Brother spy machinations that's ever existed in human history. As far as, you know, this pandering and what people want to hear, there's some ironies here and some contradictions and some paradoxes. If you take a look at the Pew Center for the People in the Press, what we see is repeatedly, year after year, we write about this in Junk Food News chapter in our books every year, more and more people are turning off corporate media. They're turning off cable news media. I mean, it's to the point now to where former establishment corporate journalists like Ted Koppel, you know, are telling Bill O'Reilly that he's the problem to his face on his own show. I mean, that, you know, and I'm just like, okay, Ted, well, you know, people that live in glass houses shouldn't throw stones, but good point there. Dan Rather, you came out as a darling of media reform after you totally blew it at CBS routinely and screwed Christina Borgeson over and a number of other people. But I mean, there's an awakening taking place, and particularly among young people, they don't want this Worldwide Wrestling Federation news kind of a sensationalism per se. They don't want this kind of candidacy wrapped up as detergent or toothpaste by the same PR firms that are selling presidential candidates. There is a hunger for news. There is a hunger for journalism. There is a hunger for knowledge. We see it in our classrooms every day, from the community college to the university. There's people that when you start telling them the truth about what's going on, their eyes light up. The switches go on, and they just want more. They want, how do I get more involved? How do we do this? What do I do next? You know, and I'm like, well, I'm not here to tell you what to do next. I'm not here to tell you what to think. I'm here to help teach you how to think. And what are the critical thinking tools that you need to better navigate your own life and your own interests? And I tell people all the time, unless you want to know what the propaganda of the establishment is, turn off television. You don't need it. It's an awful brainwashing mechanism. It's as toxic as the food that corporations have been trying to feed us for decades. It's garbage in, garbage out, man. And that's why we need independent media. And that's why we need people to want to get and dig for the truth and tell the facts, no matter what it means, no matter where it leads us. And that's why at Project Censored, we believe that there's no story that should be censored. There's no view that we should kill. We should let the views swim, sink on their own merits based on transparent sourcing and evidence. And if people have the tools to discern that on their own, we don't need to hear from pundit X or pundit Y. We don't need to hear spin from the right or from the left or from up or down or whatever the whole false paradigm of that is. We really just need to level with each other. You know, we're living in a world that has finite resources, and we face really increasing challenges as a species as the days go by. Are we really going to sit here and argue, you know, about Chris Christie or Donald Trump or Hillary Clinton, or is Bernie Sanders a socialist? I mean, is this the best we can do? I say no. And if you go and turn and watch any of you guys, and Sibel, and if you listen to any of the stuff you all do on your programs, or if you go to Project Censored, you'll see a vast treasure trove, an array of sources, an array of opinion, an array of information that you will not find in the corporate news media. And that's what we want to highlight. We've been using this people-funded thing for a long time at Project Censored. When we lost foundation funding, we, of course, have criticized them. So naturally, they don't really want to hear us criticizing, you know, how they do that. But so that's our job, is to criticize these kind of corruptions and conflicts of interest. And we're going to do it. And we went directly to our supporters and our readers, and we said, can you give us $5 a month to keep us going? We have full-time professor jobs. We have a bunch of volunteers, but we have to keep things going. We have to keep the web on. We have to pay the webmaster. We have to do basic things here. And we went to people, and we have over 1,000 people, you know, giving us a little bit every month, and we want to get 2,000 people doing that, and we agree with you, which is why I wanted to come on here with you and support your telethon, is that is the model of media democracy in action. The people support what you do, and you do it. And if they don't, like Sibel said, well, someone's not going to like this story, someone's not going to like that story. We're not about this story and that story. We're about the process of journalism. And if people really appreciate what that means, they'll support what we do. And they'll support what you do. And I urge all your viewers and listeners to really seriously consider supporting this fantastic joint effort by Peter, by Sibel. It's very, very important. The Corbett Report, very important stuff. And again, we work with Abby Martin. We work with the people over at Pacifica. We work with lots of different people, but we work with people that share the same principle of a public media, not NPR, not PBS, but truly supported by the people. And that's the model, and we think you all are really on to something, and we want to see you succeed.
Before you go, may I have one quick update, because it just popped up on my Twitter. I just got a message from someone who had supported us, and this is what he put. At least his avatar shows him, and he said, "I had no idea that you supported Muslims and you are for Muslims. I'm withdrawing my support. I don't want to have anything to do with you." I just mentioned that I came with this from background. I do not support any particular organization or religion. I don't support any particular nation. I'm here, living here, but this is what you get. This is exactly, basically, this person, this gentleman exemplified what we are talking about. And it was not any, you know, there were no cuss words, but said, "I am very disappointed. I had no idea that you were poor Muslims instead of for Muslims, and that you are defending the Muslims, so I'm going to withdraw my support." As long as we are in this shape, unfortunately, we can't complain and say, how did we end up here? Why the sorry state of everything? Just one person withdraws, so we have to go and do the recount, Peter. We have one person here who's accusing me of being a Muslim supporter.
Welcome to the idiocracy. Right? I mean, that was
You're one of those racist Nazi skinhead Muslim supporters. You know them.
Yeah, exactly. That was not supposed to be a documentary, that movie, Idiocracy. You know, but are we there yet? Seriously, those kind of remarks, I mean, that shows why we need education, why we need critical thinking skills. And that's what we do at the project, and that's what we try to teach people. And that's what you all do when you're trying to report what's really going on in the world. You're encouraging people to embrace the information, engage with you all in the information. And you take on people that disagree with you. But, you know, I don't know what you do with people like this. You know, you're not giving you a lot to work with. But that's okay, you know. You need to. That's every more reason why you need to forge ahead and continue doing what you're doing, and replace that supporter, quote unquote, with 10 more that really appreciate what you're trying to do.
Well, and to that point, Mickey Huff, I want to acknowledge some of the people who have joined our Kickstarter campaign just since we went on the air this evening. And I'm going to name names. Solly Tolvanian, Carl, Mark J., Walter Byron, P. Mason, Ivan, Colin Connaughton, Gladstone Davies, Rebecca Barker, Cliff Goebel, Daniel Barnum, and I could mention many others who have been very generous. And to me, generosity is not enumerated by a dollar amount. For some people, $10 is an extremely generous contribution. And we've had a couple of people who've kicked in $1,000, $1,800, $2,500, and that's based on their ability to do so. And we respect whatever you can kick in. And it helps us even if you can only contribute $5 or $8 or $12, because it helps build momentum and it shows your validation of the concept that we're offering here. And other people will pick up on that and say, wow, they've got 1,240 supporters. I'd like to be number 1,241. So our thanks to those of you who are willing to invest directly in independent journalism and get away from the pandering and the compromised media that we see in so many cases on our screens today. And we're going to wrap up here in the next few minutes, but I want to get a final comment from each of you. And let me start with James. You haven't gotten a lot of time to talk here since you joined us, but talk to our viewers about what Newsbud means to you and why you're asking for their support.
We live in a potentially very dangerous political moment right now, and I think people understand what's at stake in this election cycle. Regardless, really, of the way that you evaluate the populist movements that are arising right now, Trump and Sanders, I think that it represents a very interesting and at the same time a potentially worrying phenomenon, which is that people are often people will say, well, this is good because it will bust up the sort of party establishment hacks that have been in power for too long, so this is a good thing. But of course, with that comes the with that kind of populism comes the dark specter of authoritarianism, and I think people are starting to see that no matter which side of the aisle they're on and which candidate they're looking at, I'm sure they're afraid of some sort of authoritarian movement coming along. And I think what that represents is the reaction that people are having to the dislocation that they are feeling on a number of different levels, economically, for example, or in terms of a political influence, but also the dislocation that they're feeling from losing that sort of establishment spectrum of controlled thought that has existed in the era of mass media, where all opinion comes from the New York Times or maybe the Washington Post, and that's kind of your spectrum of allowable opinion. We are now in a very troubling spot for a lot of people mentally, because they're losing that anchor, and now there's these voices all over, and they're such extreme voices. I've never heard this before, and people are trying to orient themselves within that. So the populism is to be expected to a certain extent, because people are rallying around whatever concept strikes them, whatever they think, okay, I hear that, I resonate with that message, 100% support, let's go. And so it is opening up a different field of political thought, and it is energizing people in a way that people haven't been energized for a long time. But as I say, there are authoritarian movements. I mean, this is how authoritarian movements start, which is why we should be concerned about this. In that respect, I like to think of Newsbud as the potential wrecking ball to the authoritarian wave that could be coming as a result of this. Because again, when people are galvanized in their opinion, in their echo chamber, anyone with an outside opinion is just trash and shills and have to be turned off immediately. We can't listen to anyone other than what we want to hear. That is where the authoritarianism comes from. So if we can get an outlet like Newsbud funded and going and out to the people, I really think that's the counter, that's the tonic, that's the way we avoid that type of phenomenon from taking hold. Establishing that there is a new paradigm, but look, in this new paradigm you can listen to other people, there are other perspectives, let's open it up rather than close ranks. And so that's what I like to think the Newsbud experiment that we're running here, the potential that it represents.
Thank you, James Corbett. Really appreciate that. Very well said. Professor Mickey Huff, a final comment from you, please.
Yeah, I'd like to thank Peter, Sibel, James. I'd like to thank you for what you've all been doing for years. And what you're doing now is an incredible endeavor. And again, I'd like to say that Project Censored and the Media Freedom Foundation certainly supports your efforts and what you're doing, and I can see us collaborating in various ways in the future. We have pretty similar philosophies on the significance of journalism and news media, and we're not really attached to the outcomes. We're attached to the process, and we think more people should have more voices and more avenues and more outlets to say and hear the things that are really going on in the world. And we're very much in favor of the method that you're doing, because we're doing the same thing with monthly supporters or individual supporters and doing that route. We're working on multiple fronts with education. We just founded something called the Global Critical Media Literacy Project, gcml.org, that's working with various media literacy groups around the country to really promote education and, again, really educate the next generation of citizen journalists. Again, we're about trying to help people understand how to think critically. We're not interested in telling people what to think. We want independent thinkers. We want free thinkers. That's what makes the world a great place, and that's where great ideas come from. They don't come from corporate control, or they don't come from myopic foundation ideologies. That's not produced a very favorable environment for most people in the world, has it? And so, again, I strongly support this quest for a vibrant and independent press, and I certainly wish you all the best. And I'd invite people that don't know as much about Project Censored to check out our website, projectcensored.org. We'll certainly be in touch, and we'll certainly be following what you're doing, all of you. So thanks again for inviting us into this conversation. We really appreciate it.
And thank you, Mickey. You were with us on our failed attempt last week, and you were very patient through our glitches tonight until we finally got everything cruising.
Well worth it.
Thank you for everything. I do appreciate that. And let's get a final word from Sibel Edmonds tonight.
Well, I definitely want to thank Professor Huff, because one way he just proved this, the fact that Project Censor and what he has been doing is within this independent, and being independent is by coming on this show. Last night I was invited to a radio show, and I was talking about this, and we were talking about how many of these are allies, people that I have been working with, other podcast producers, other so-called alternative outlets. And while they liked the idea and they said they supported it, they said they didn't want to support publicly or have me on Newsbud, because that would be conflict of interest. It may be considered competition instead of, people's. and basically, but we have been, I know, Peter, you have been getting that as well. So I have to say only a handful of alternative, independent outlets, such as Corbett and with Professor Huff and with Ocelli Effect, and very few who have said, I like the idea and I'm willing, and we are willing to support this. They think, this whole divide and conquer mentality works with this area of media as well. So coming here basically shows that Project Censor is not in that category with 97, 98%. And so I'm very thankful. And James Corbett just summarized some of the most, again, important point. He always does. It's the worst thing to go after James Corbett, because once he explains, I get so deep into it that then I can't talk about anything. Like, those were not only great points, they were made in such an articulate way, and I can't follow that standard. He is absolutely right. James is so right about we are reaching this critical turning point. I'm not talking about this based on some gut feeling, based on what we have been watching, take place, especially since 9/11, and where it's headed. And especially in the last few years, that's how I have been viewing this as well. It's like this ticking bomb. And unfortunately, I don't want to sound pessimistic. it doesn't look good, and it's extremely difficult to maintain optimism. And I'm always try to, even when I'm down, I try to recover and get back to that, to that hope and optimism. And again, to me, maybe this is a symbol. This is going to basically the revelation for me here, what we are doing as our team with our partners, network partners, with Newsbud. But he said it really absolutely right, and I have to take that recording of that 2 minutes that he could sum it up so articulately, because I can never do that in 20 minutes, and just put that 2 minutes up there at Boiling Frogs Post, put that up there at a Newsbud Kickstarter page, because I haven't heard anyone really put it out that articulately. And I'm so glad. I'm so glad that you joined us, James, and it's always an honor. Thank you.
Well, on behalf of James Corbett and Sibel Edmonds, I want to thank Professor Mickey Huff for joining us tonight. We really appreciate your advocacy and your smart commentary about the media and the work that we have ahead of us. Once again, just as a recap, I want to invite you to go to newsbud.com. You can also go directly to Kickstarter.com and put Newsbud in the project window. Either way, you'll have access to our video that explains what Newsbud is all about. On the Kickstarter page, there's a detailed budget, a list of people like me and James and Bill Conroy and Guillermo who are participating in this. Guillermo Jimenez, I'm sorry, I blocked on his last name for a second. And we have plans. And those plans will only be activated when we reach our funding goal. And to do that, we need you to donate if you can. And after you've donated as much as you can, we ask you to click as much as you can. Share the information on social media. Share it via email, via Twitter, however you communicate with people. And we're moving forward toward our goal. This is a heavy lift, and we recognize that. It's very ambitious. But the outcome is something that we feel is extremely important. It's the kind of work that we have devoted our professional lives to, and we want to continue to do that in a way that's not compromised by the factors that we have described in some detail here this evening. So thank you for clicking into this live video feed. And again, we invite you to go to newsbud.com and support us as much as you possibly can. For this team, I'm Peter B. Collins. Thanks for joining us this evening.